saw the Pera Palace nearly 20 years ago, you had to have a rather specific reason for being in that section of Istanbul, like getting a lamp rewired or calling on a transgender prostitute. The old hotel was squat and square, wrapped in dirty green-plastered marble. Its faded fin de siècle grandeur was out of place amid the seedy mid-rises that had grown up pell-mell in the 1970s and 1980s. Inside, the red velvet chairs in the Orient bar were always empty. The bartender seemed surprised whenever I stopped in for a cocktail and a bowl of stale leblebi, tooth-cracking roasted chickpeas. Things had once been different. The Pera Palace was established in 1892 to service clients arriving on the Orient Express in the capital of the Ottoman Empire. For decades afterward, it was the obvious place for out-of-towners to stay. The wood and iron elevator, which rose up like a bird cage through the marble staircase, had been only the second one installed in Europe, after the Eiffel Towers. A Baroque dining hall stood next to a lounge of faux marble inlay and filigreed screens, covered by a soaring glass canopy. Beyond the building's stately facade lay Pera, Istanbul's most fashionable neighborhood. A short walk along the main street, known to many Istanbulus in the 19th century and after as the Grande Rue, led to the embassies of most of the major world powers. Next door to the hotel, American diplomats shared the street with both the YMCA and legal brothels, and not far away, the British, Russians, and Germans could entertain government officials in gilded restaurants and dark clubs. The Pera Palace was meant to be the last whisper of the Occident on the way to the Orient, the grandest Western-style hotel in the seat of the world's greatest Islamic empire. Like Istanbul itself, the hotel was Europeans' first major port of call when they went east into a traveler's fantasy of sultans, harems, and dervishes. But before the Pera Palace had celebrated its 20th year in business, all of that had begun to change. A revolution deposed a long-reigning Ottoman sultan and ushered in more than a decade of political turmoil and communal violence. The First World War brought military defeat and foreign occupation. And in 1923, in one of modern history's most profound exercises in political self-creation, Turks made a purposeful break with their Ottoman past, rejecting an Islamic and multi-religious empire and declaring in its place a secular, more homogeneous republic. Turkey's new leaders shifted their capital 200 miles to the east, to the wind-whipped hills of Ankara, far from the corrupting memories of the old center. A young reporter named Ernest Hemingway saw the beginning. From all I had seen in the movies, Istanbul ought to have been white and glistening and sinister, he wrote in the Toronto Daily Star in the late autumn of 1922. He had arrived from the Balkans by train, rolling past brick-red Byzantine land walls and children splashing in the water, into a tumble of small mosques and wooden houses with dusty domes and sprung clapboards rubbed gray by salt and wind. He had seen roads choked with colorfully dressed peasants trudging behind muddy, bristle-haired water buffaloes. Queues of migrants in damp overcoats snaked around foreign embassies. Demobilized officers strutted in frayed tunics. From a plaza near the Pera Palace, he looked through a spyglass at refugee families pressed tight against the railings of a steamer spewing ash. Everything white was dirty white, he observed, and the mood was hopeless and resigned, like the feeling of waiting while a doctor and nurse are upstairs with someone you love. Veils and harems, fezzes and frock coats were disappearing. The Sultan and the Caliphate, the institution that embodied Muslims' understanding of God's will on earth, would soon be declared defunct. Hours and dates would be reckoned the way they were in Paris or New York, not as in Mecca and Medina. Ministers and generals were moving to Ankara. Foreign embassies and their entourages would follow. Istanbul was settling into a self-absorbed sense of huzun, the hollowed-out melancholy that Turkish intellectuals said infused the crumbling walls, tumble-down mansions, and rotting seaside villas. But between the two world wars, displacement and disorientation